What's up guys, Will here, and I'm here with another gameplay video, and today we will be talking about, it's sort of a response video to one of the videos made by GBay99, I believe is his name, and he does videos on his channel about League, but they are more instructional and they simply talk about tips and theories and things of this nature on gaining ELO and League and the ELO rating system in general. So in his video he talked about why dying is very negative, and he pretty much mentions that for certain high ELO players, and I think he infers that most high ELO players who are in the professional realm, so right now that would be diamond or above, which is 2200 plus, he likens them to a certain philosophy where you pretty much play passive and wait for the opponent to make a mistake. And he goes on to give many reasons as to why this is in fact the best way to play. And he says stuff like, if you do this, then once you capitalize on your opponent's mistakes, you will gain the advantage and win games. And then he goes on to talk about a certain philosophical statement where I can't remember exact words, but essentially the concept was you can't determine your own victory until you find or until you see when the opponent makes a mistake, or something of that nature. It's not too important, but what is important is that this is actually not accurate. Sure, in terms of professional play, especially in tournaments, this may be the case because you come from a very strong team and you're against an opposing team who is probably equally as strong, and every mistake you make in lane will be capitalized upon and most likely transitioned into a kill or death. And because of that, in a lot of tournament play, when all 10 players in a game are pretty much at their skill cap and play optimally well, you pretty much have to play passively and wait for your opponent to make a mistake, whether it is missing CS or getting ganked due to overextending. These things will most likely transition into a kill, and therefore this philosophy does work in terms of high ELO play and professional play, because there are so few mistakes that are made. And one can reason that in high ELO it all comes down to pretty much silly mistakes people rarely make and team composition that wins games, as well as a few other stuff such as team play and team coordination. However, what about the majority of the League of Legends community who are not at the 2200 plus ELO level? Does the same philosophy work well? Well, to answer that question, the answer is no, and the reason is quite simple. The ELO rating system is not perfect, and therefore if you're anywhere in the range of 0 ELO all the way up to as high as 1900 ELO or higher, you will most likely face a lot of games where the teams are exceptionally unbalanced in skill, and you either get pub stomped or pub stomp the opposing team. So why does this make it so that GBay's statement is inaccurate? Well, to put it simply, for GBay's statement to work, you pretty much play passively, doing the best you can CSing, and pretty much playing exceptionally defensively until you see your opponent making a mistake. Then you capitalize on this and you win your lane. Well, in most of these games with the ELO rating system that is not perfect, what happens if all your allies are doing exceptionally horribly? Say your bot lane has fed 6 deaths in total between the AD carry and support, and your top lane has already fed 4 and has spent most of his time dead, while their top lane is taking the turret and will most likely be able to roam soon. Well, to put it simply, what happens here is that if you were to continue playing so passively, you will most likely, if you're lucky, be able to pick up on maybe 2 or 3 kills over the course of the first 10 to 20 minutes of the game. Unfortunately, this is not enough and will most likely lead to your defeat. Sure, you may have gone 3-0, but your enemies are going 9-0 and 12-0. Now, what do you do in these cases? Well, there are 2 ways to solve this problem. You can either continue playing passively, give up the game, and slowly but surely gain elo, since you will always technically win versus your laning partner. Of course, this is how some players, like the ones mentioned in G-Bay's video, play, and how they, over a exceptionally long amount of games, rose to the diamond level. Well, unfortunately, this may not always work because of the deviations in elo rating and how you might be paired with exceptionally bad players. One way to rise much quickly, and as seen by many players, is to play aggressively. A couple examples are Robert X. Lee. His current name is Roberto X. Lee, and he changed his name because someone took his old name. But he made a Smurf called IDK space what WHT space 2 name, and in less than 100 games he managed to rise from a completely blank 1200 Smurf to a diamond level Smurf. This has been proven too with aggressive AD carries such as Chaox and his Smurfs, such as Wicca Wicca Wah, and many other players. G-Bay mentions that Reginald is a clear example of how aggressive players may often be stuck at 1700 elo. While this may have been the case in Season 2, I do have to point out that this logic is flawed because Reginald duo queued with his girlfriend in the solo queue ladder for a long time during Season 2, which is why his elo rating may not properly reflect his rating. As you can see now, Reginald in Season 3 has risen to the top 10 and has stayed there for the last month or so on his account, as have many members of Team Solo Mid. So as you can see, this theory is definitely flawed in the fact that Reginald right now, since he has chosen to solo queue by himself and duo queue with reputable players such as Dan Din, he has pretty much risen to a very high elo that properly represents his rating. No offense to his girlfriend or anything like that. And as you can see from many of his tournament plays, Reginald has done exceptionally well, at least in the North American region, in tournaments despite his elo being not so high in Season 2. So to put it simply, aggressive play, though more risky, will definitely increases the potential. By playing aggressively, you force a situation where either your opponents get the kill or you get the kill. Afromu, who used to main AD carry, was an exceptional example of this. When he was playing bot lane, he would, after the 5 to 10 minute mark, pretty much force aggressive situations along with his support, so that either by the end of the trade he had died or his enemies had died. And after he would respawn or go back to base, he would go straight back to lane and promptly reinforce an aggressive fight, and pretty much, as Scar would say, go all in. Now, why is this better in some ways and worse in others? Well, by playing aggressively like this, you either force a situation where you are exceptionally fed, your enemies are exceptionally fed, or a mix of both of these scenarios where both you and your enemy are mildly fed. The reason why this is good for high elo players is because their skill cap is so high that they rarely make mistakes. Because of that, in most cases, it will be in their favor because they will in fact be the ones who end up winning the trade and getting the kills. Reginald is definitely a great example if you've seen his stream in the last week or so. He's been playing very aggressively even on some passive mid lanes such as Karthus. Because of this, it forces many situations where either he gets the kill, his jungler gets the kill, or their enemies get the kills. This is exceptionally great for carrying games where you are at a severe disadvantage, because your skill will make up for the aggressive situation, and if you are highly more skilled than your opponents, or maybe even just slightly more skilled, you will win the trade and therefore pick up kills. Therefore, by being aggressive, even if your top lane is 0-9 and your bot lane is 0-6 total in kills, by forcing aggressive situations when you know you will win, you will get exceptionally more fed and be able to carry games rather than playing passively, as G-Bay stated. By playing passively, sure, you may be able to keep up or exceed them in CS, but unless you are beating them in CS severely and or picking up lots of kills despite playing so passively, it will be very hard to carry teammates who are exceptionally horrible, which happens a lot of the times all across the board in the ELO rating system for League, from 0 ELO all the way up to possibly even Diamond, which you can see from the streams because many Diamond players still run into games where they're either pub stomped or they pub stomp because every other lane wins. This is why, as you've seen from some streams, high elo Diamond player games can be exceptionally interesting. Another quick example would be Afromu, as he has been streaming and shown in his streams for certain Diamond Elo games. As I said before, he would, after he respawned, whether it's from a death or recalling, he would immediately rush back to the middle of the map, start farming, and immediately try and engage in an all-in fight with any enemy that would possibly come near him. You see this often with such such champions that excel poorly in team fights, such as Draven. By being so aggressive and pushing lanes on his own, he forces the teammates and the enemies to congregate towards him. Therefore, he avoids 5v5 situations, which Draven is very poor at excelling in, and he goes all in each of these, which either ends in him getting the kill or the enemies getting the kill. So as you can see, playing aggressively does have its benefits as well. Unfortunately, if you do not take everything into account, you can lose the trade, and playing aggressive can be exceptionally bad if you are outskilled or you do not take into account all the variables such as warding, jungler ganks, and global ults. But by taking all of these into account and still believing and reasoning that you can still definitely win the trade, such as what Afromu or Chaos does, a lot of the time, you can definitely force situations where you gain a lot of kills and manage to carry your team back to victory. So in conclusion, playing aggressively has its benefits and yields potential for you to get a lot more fed in a lot shorter time than playing passively, which can be a definite bonus if your teammates are doing exceptionally poorly. My recommendation is to gauge your enemies and seeing just how far in skill they are from you. If you sense that they are in fact far in skill and that the jungler is not near, and taking all the other variables into account, you may want to just try playing aggressively. If on the other hand you are equally skilled or feel like you might be outskilled, you always want to try and play passively and at least match him in CS. And also, if you feel like all your allies are doing exceptionally poorly, and I must add, and for sure, you have to realize that you are much better than your opponent, and if you really believe this and can see this, then play aggressively. But for most people in the lower elo bracket, from anywhere from 0 elo to gold level or higher, most people get the wrong assumption that they are more skilled than their opponents when they're not, and they try and play aggressively and are outskilled and lose the trade, and therefore end up dying and contributing further to their defeat. Jibei does make the point that many people try and get kills and end up feeding at the end of the day. So taking this into account, you must be entirely sure that you will win trades if you play aggressively. Skara, the mid laner for Dignitas, is another clear example of this. In his streams, he clearly states all the mathematical calculations that go behind all of his trades. Before every trade, he often mathematically adds up the damage, takes into account resistance, and then he oftentimes has the base damage of all his opponent's spells memorized, along with the added damage that certain items would give. Therefore, with all this knowledge, he can calculate if a trade were to go down, what would happen and who would win. By doing this, he knows ahead of time whether or not to win or even initiate a trade. So thank you for watching all this. Sorry if my voice was kind of monotone throughout. I wanted to keep it as informative as possible. And if you like this, please subscribe. I do have to admit that this is my theory, so a lot of these statements are based on my opinion and they are not to be taken as fact. So I want to avoid any fights or controversies whatsoever in the comments. If you do not agree or anything else, that's fine. Just take it elsewhere. I don't think anyone's going to care. And finally, last but not least, please subscribe if you haven't. And thank you for watching this video.